Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Network Observability, delivering actionable insights to network operations. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is Shamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering Network Management at Enterprise Management Associates. Shamus has more than 16 years of experience in the IT industry as an industry analyst and journalist. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks. And before I hand things over to Shamus, I wanted the audience to know that Shamus will be concluding his presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA with the on-demand playback, as well as additional information about this new research report. So I hope you will check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Shamus McGillicuddy. Shamus?
Thank you, Raleigh, and thank you, everyone, for joining me today. Before we go any further, just wanted to acknowledge and thank the sponsors of this multi-sponsor research from EMA. We have Broadcom, First Wave, Kentic, Micro Focus, NS1, and Riverbed, all companies that provide network management solutions of one kind or another, network observability, some of them might use that term, and network monitoring and network performance management, all terms that we'll be talking about today. Our EMA's multi-sponsor research is a program that we do where analysts lead the process of developing the project and writing the questionnaire, surveying the market, writing up a report. But the sponsors join as financial supporters of the research in order to be able to use the data themselves and talk to us about what the data might, what the research might explore. But it is very much independent research that is simply done in partnership with vendors who fund the research. So, agenda. What will we be talking about today? Well, we'll talk briefly about research goals and methodology. And of course, the research goals from a high level are to understand what people are talking about when they talk about network observability, which is a term that no one had heard of more than a year ago. Then we'll talk about why monitoring isn't good enough, that is network monitoring. And we'll go into defining what network observability means, because I feel at this point that no one really knows. And then we will chart a path for you to attaining network observability. What is it? And how do you get there? By the end of this webinar, maybe you'll have some ideas about that. And then we'll turn it over to Raleigh for a Q&A, and she'll facilitate that for us. So, research goals and methodology. Starting about a year ago, many vendors that I talk to on a regular basis in the network management and network infrastructure world starting using the term observability for describing what they do or what they try to do, specifically network observability. Now, observability is a term that DevOps knows well. It's about understanding the internal state of a system by collecting and analyzing the external outputs that it can produce, such as metrics, logs, traces. That isn't network observability, though. I mean, that's when DevOps talks about observability, they're often talking about like application performance, understanding the state of an application environment. NetOps people, they're thinking about something bigger. The network is a lot bigger than the application environment, much harder to understand. So what is network observability? That was our goal, to define network observability. Why are vendors talking about it? What do they mean when they talk about it? And provide a roadmap for IT organizations to navigate the marketing hype that's perhaps surrounding the term that you're probably hearing more and more about. And at the same time, we want to show how network tool vendors, based on what our research shows, should evolve their solutions to provide better support to IT organizations. As we all talk about this concept of network observability and whether it's a thing and what it could mean and how it can make things better for you. We also want to help IT buyers understand what traditional network monitoring vendors and network performance management vendors mean when they use the term, of course, and provide vendors with data from the market to help establish a product roadmap to provide network observability solutions if we all agree that the concept of network observability means something and is helpful. Anyway, that all sounds wishy-washy to you probably, but we'll get more concrete as we go on. In terms of methodology, we surveyed 402 enterprise stakeholders, people who select, implement, maintain, and or use network management tools. And then we also interviewed one-on-one a variety of stakeholders in mostly Fortune 500 IT organizations who have responsibilities around networking and network management tools. Some of them are smaller. There's like one $500 million company. There was a very large, maybe one of the largest government agencies in the world, and a couple of private companies whose revenue I don't know. In terms of demographics of the people we surveyed, a nice mix of mid-sized, large, and very large enterprises in terms of headcount, anywhere from 500 people to 10,000 or 20,000 or more. A mix of North America and Europe. In North America, we covered the United States and maybe a little bit of Canada. In Europe, it was France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. More than a dozen industries were covered. The most frequent ones were manufacturers, banking and finance, retail, professional technical services not related to IT. So think of like law firms, accounting firms, maybe architectural firms, healthcare providers and hospitals, and energy companies. Those are the big ones. Job titles was a mix of subject matter experts like technical personnel such as engineers and architects, and a lot of middle management types like supervisors and directors, and some CIOs and VPs. And then lots of groups represented, mostly network engineering or network architecture groups, the CIO suite, the network operations group, some security, some cloud, a little bit of DevOps, some others. Anyway, why isn't monitoring good enough? Why are people talking about network observability instead of network monitoring? Well, I think it's because most people are pretty unhappy with network monitoring. Only 26%, about less than 26% of organizations are telling us that they are fully successful with the use of their network operations tools today. 55% tell us we're doing okay, but we could be doing better. That's a lot. That's a lot of people who are recognizing the fact that their tools, they're getting the job done, but it's not good enough. And then for almost 5% saying somewhat unsuccessful and 1% saying we're a mess. But the takeaway here is things need to change when it comes to the tools you use to monitor, manage, troubleshoot your networks. This network operations manager you might see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, he's at a $500 million SaaS provider, and he tells us, the more time I spend in the industry, the more I feel like we're not getting it quite right. You can set a myriad of thresholds in your tool for alerting and so forth, but there will always be an edge use case that slips under the radar. What he's saying is like, he's got to do a lot in his tool to make it useful. And despite all the work he does, he still misses stuff. We'll get into that a little bit more, but when we asked the people in the survey, what are your top problems with your network monitoring, network management tools? These are the top 5 responses. Limited scope. I can't monitor everything I need to monitor. Cloud, for instance. I talk to so many network operations people who don't monitor the cloud. They monitor maybe the direct link from their data center into the cloud, but they don't know what's going on in the cloud. But they used to monitor the data center network quite closely, in fact, closer than anything else in their enterprise. But then they abdicated all of that when applications moved into the cloud. That's not good. Maybe it's good enough for some of you, but I don't think it's good enough for everybody. Difficult to implement and maintain the tool. How many of you have a tool that's like 1 or 2 versions out of date, and you just don't want to upgrade it because you know it's going to be a headache. Something's going to break. Maybe the tool won't come back up when you finish updating it. Maybe the new version is going to break some of the processes that you've built around the tool. It's a headache. Tools are too noisy. Too many alerts coming out. You don't know what's actually a problem or not. Lack of insights. You got a lot of access to data, but you don't know what the data is telling you. And then finally, maybe the data is just not that good. Some people tell us like, I I don't know if the data I got in my tool is actually representing reality because I'm not confident in my tool's ability to collect data reliably. Speaking of noise, we asked people what percentage of the alerts coming out of your monitoring tools are actionable, as in indicative of a problem that needs to be solved. 47%. Less than half of the alerts coming out of their tools are actionable, are problems. The rest is just noise. And here you see a NOC analyst at a private communications technology company telling me, we don't know which ones to check out. So we have to check all of them to verify that they are false alarms or not. I talked to someone else earlier this year at a Fortune 100 consumer goods manufacturer who told me that like at any given time, there are 1,000 open tickets on his network, and he can't get to them because he's focused on the critical incidents that are breaking everything. And so he can't get to the open tickets that may be just noise or may not be noise. Troubleshooting workflows are ill-defined. Network troubleshooting is like something that NOCs and network engineering teams are doing all day, every day, and their tools don't support it. The tools they have present data, and then you got to piece it together. We said, are you satisfied with the network monitoring or network observability tools support of troubleshooting workflows? Like, are your tools good at supporting your troubleshooting workflows? 24% were completely satisfied, very satisfied with what their tools are able to do there. And 54% somewhat satisfied, meaning room for improvement. I see that as like the biggest gap. Like, you're doing okay, but you know you could be doing better. Like, you're able to get things done because you have people that can use these tools and troubleshoot. So we're doing okay. That's what I see there. And these two people here kind of lay it out for you. Network engineer at a $14 billion aerospace and defense company says, with our tools, you can't take data in its raw form and have it tell you a story. You have to dissect the layers of the data. It's a time-consuming process to get the data into a form where the light bulb goes on. Light bulb goes on. Shouldn't it just be a flick of the switch instead of like, well, in order to get this light bulb to turn on, I've got to build a lamp. That's not going to work for most people. It shouldn't, but they're making that's how they get by. Network engineer at a privately held game company says there are things I'd like the network to tell me or things I'd like to know from the network, but the data and insights are not easily accessible in a practical way. If a service is misbehaving or user experience is affected, I want to find out as fast as possible, but that's hard. He doesn't know what's happening. Like he can see data, but he can't get meaning from the data easily in order to answer business related questions that he's worried about. And as a result, network teams, like network tool engineering teams, the people who implement and maintain the tools that are used to manage, monitor, and troubleshoot the network, they got to do a lot of extra work. 94% of IT organizations said that they can't get useful insights from the tools without customization and process documentation and integration. I got to integrate this with with ServiceNow. It would be great if that integration was out of the box, but most vendors, no. We've got great APIs, but we're not integrating out of the box. I need to integrate this with security monitoring. Someone was just asking, hello, how big is the sample of the stats provided? 400. We surveyed 400 people. So lots of work. Lots of work needs to be done. I need to integrate this. I need to script these things into the tool. I need to write down and document processes for how these tools are used because only certain people have the skill sets to use these tools in their raw form. The rest of them don't know what they're looking at. So they got to do all that work, and then there are negative outcomes as a result of that. Oh, and this $8 billion technology company, this network tools engineer, whose job it is to build these tools, you see here, he says, when you deploy a monitoring tool, you have to adapt the tool to your environment, train engineers on how to use it, build processes around the tools. Unless you have someone full-time to adapt a tool to your network, insights are overlooked or not developed. He has to develop the insights in his tools. It's not the vendor that's doing it for him. Maybe the vendor's providing capabilities for him to build it. You know, like, oh, I can script in their tool easily. But why is he scripting? Um, Consequences of all that custom work, 46% say it's increasing the costs around their tools. 39% say it impacts usability and adoption. Like, people are just like, ah, oh, this is so complex. I'm not going to use this tool. I'm going to go back to the tool I was using for 5 years, even if it's not good enough. Delays in time to value. It just takes too long to get a tool up and running in the environment. I mean, I've had people on the vendor side say, our tool, you can install and it's up and running in like 5, 10, 15 minutes. Okay, but is it like useful? And then reduced tool effectiveness. Is the tool actually doing anything that's useful? No. A lot of the times people in certain parts of, with certain skill sets are going to say, no, it's not. All right, so let's define this. We've established the fact that like network monitoring isn't good enough for a lot of people. Maybe they don't know what network observability is, but perhaps if it was defined for them, it'd be like, yeah, that's what I need. And so with all these vendors talking about network observability, you know, the network operations, the network engineering's pros, they're hearing the terms and they're saying to themselves, what does this mean? Like, before I kicked off this research, I read and read and read. I was like, what does network observability mean? I'm reading all these definitions, blogs, watching webinars and stuff, and I couldn't really figure out what it meant because no one really agreed. You know, no one really agreed on what it meant. Like, I read this one blog that I'll never forget. This person was like writing out, this is what network observability means. And I was thinking to myself, he thinks that network monitoring is fault management and that network observability is performance management. And that is like a conversation that was done. That was a thing that was worked out like 20 years ago. You know, like we figured that terminology out 20 years ago. Network observability is not network performance management versus network fault management. No, it's something else. It has to be something else. And so we're going to define it for you here right now. But first, I asked in interviews, hey, what do you think it means? Just to see like what's out there, right? And this network engineer at a $14 billion aerospace company says, for me, it's just another buzzword. This is the cynic's point of view, by the way. I'm still for the term enterprise management or network management. Yeah, people love the term network management. Monitoring engineer at a $15 billion financial services company said, I think it's just another catchphrase for network monitoring. All right, so maybe we should just end the webinar here. We're done. This is all pointless. Wait, no. Some other people have ideas. Network architect, monitoring architect at a $35 billion media company says, theoretically, monitoring is the collection of data, where observability is the analysis of that data to tell you if the system is behaving well. You can tell he's a little bit influenced by the DevOps world here. The question is, who does that analysis, a human or the tool? In the networking world, it's too often the human. That's what I find in my research. Here, this guy's asking that question. Should it be the human or the tool? Network tools engineer, the $18 billion technology company, says it's about getting insights from the network. It could mean more of a focus on the business impacts of the network. Well, that's a good idea. I think we should focus on that. And then this NetOps manager at a $500 million SaaS provider says, I think of monitoring as something that is not actioning. Actioning, that's not really a word probably, but I like it. I like that word, actioning. He says observability is about integration into event management, turning your observable metrics, and in networking there are a lot of metrics, into something that alerts you or drives an action. So action. Could he mean like insights that drive an action? That's useful. I like that idea. We asked these 400 people we surveyed, 402, sorry, do you believe network observability is a useful term for describing the tools you use to understand and manage the health and performance of your network? 90% said yes. Interesting. 90% said yes, even though probably most of them hadn't heard the term before they took the survey. Like they use tools, but they're probably a lot of the people I was talking to one-on-one had not heard the term network observability until I asked them if they had any thoughts about it. And then they were like, well, I think it might mean this. So anyway, 90% say, yeah, that's a useful term. But then we also asked another question, not shown here. Which of these three terms you prefer to use for the tools that you use to monitor and troubleshoot your network or something like that? 20% said they prefer the term network observability. The rest were split between network performance management and network monitoring. So while they think the term network observability is helpful, they're still married to those older terms, and that's fine, you know, but it just gives you a sense of where people are in their understanding what's happening here. Then we ask this question, here's some words and phrases. Which of these do you most associate with the concept of network observability? And we allowed them to choose multiple answers here, which is why it adds up to well over 100%. But so yes, number one, monitoring. People told me that they considered network observability to be a subset of monitoring, or monitoring to be a network monitoring to be a superset of network. Well, anyway, there's clearly an overlap between the concept of monitoring and the concept of network observability, and that makes sense. I think what we're trying to say when we talk about network observability is we're advancing to something better than just simple network monitoring. It's got to be better. And so monitoring is at the heart of it, right? And then security, a majority of them said security, and that's interesting. We haven't really talked about security, but here it is showing up near the top of the list. And as an analyst covering network operations, I am well aware that over the last half decade or more, the network operations team has found themselves working, and network engineering and architecture, those guys in the networking world are working very closely with security. And they've always been worried about security. They've always considered security a part of the responsibility, but they're not cybersecurity. They're not threat hunting. They're not like they're not doing like security reviews of stuff. They're worried about firewalls and access control lists and segmentation and things like that. But they're also aware of the fact that a lot of times when they're troubleshooting something, the thing they're troubleshooting is not a performance issue or a user experience issue. It's actually a security incident or an attack that's manifesting as a performance issue. So they need to know what's happening in the world of security. And here, when they talk about network observability, they're like, you know what? I think that network observability should include security. Like, I need security insights. Okay. Number three, data. Data is the heart of monitoring, but it also is the heart of network observability. Like, data is an essential piece of operations. Like, you can't act without the data that tells you what you need to act on. But I think what I see is the volume of data is increasing. It's the types of data you're worried about are expanding. And that's part of what's happening here. You may have sometimes when I talk to people like about network monitoring, they're like, "Yes, that's my SNMP monitoring tool. Like that's MIBs and traps. That's me. I'm doing this. That's it. Maybe I have a little bit of flow. I'm doing a little bit of flow. But if I have a branch office that's having problems, I look at my SNMP monitoring tool to see how the router's doing. And if the router's fine, then I call my service provider. That's 20th century operations. 21st century operations should be, I know everything. I'm collecting data from everywhere. I can solve any problem as long as I got a good tool. So more data. Data is a big piece of network observability. Number four, actionable insights. What was that guy saying earlier? Actioning. I need something that drives an action. Actionable insights. I think that's the key here. You have a monitoring tool that has broad insight considerations like security in addition to network performance and end user experience maybe and things like that. And it's got to have a foundation of like robust data lake maybe. But actionable insights, being able to go from data to action. with insight. That's the key there. Everything else here is tertiary, like predictions, automation, answers to questions, net DevOps I threw in there, what the heck, AI and machine learning. It's actionable insights. That's the one that really resonated out of all that other chaff at the bottom. So EMA is proposing this definition, and you can twist and bend it in ways, but try to stick to this. A network monitoring system that collects a complete and diverse set of network data to provide deep visibility and actionable insights into the current and future state of a network. Those actionable insights include, but are not limited to, network performance, of course, application performance, yes, network security, definitely a priority, and end user experience. But doesn't stop there. Doesn't stop there. Insights about anything, actionable insights about anything that has to do with your network, so that you can support the business in the way it needs to be supported. So now we know maybe what network observability is and why we're talking about it. How do you get there? Diversify the data that you collect. Don't rely on one, two, or three types of data. You probably already know this. You got it. The data you've got to collect and analyze with your tools is exploding. The volume's going up, but also the variety. So we asked them, have any of the following types of network data become more important or less important to management and monitoring of your network over the last 3 years? And everything is becoming more important for the most part. Network device metrics, via SNMP MIBs, APIs, streaming telemetry, huge increase. I mean, table stakes, but it's just becoming more important. But then number two here, number two is cloud provider VPC flow logs, like from AWS or whatever Google Cloud and Azure call them. So cloud, they're worried about the cloud. They want to know what's happening in the cloud, not just to and from the cloud, but in the cloud. Network flow records like NetFlow, IPFix, that's been around for a very long time, but becoming more important. Also, synthetic traffic data. So network and application test traffic. I need to get better insight into end user experience, and here's a way to do it. I need to understand what's happening in my SaaS applications, and here's a good way to do it. Configuration information, raw config files, structured data. More than half of them want that. Network device events, not just metrics, but events, whether that's SNMP traps, maybe syslogs, stuff like that. A lot of interest in that. And then nearly half want routing data and packet data. DNS logs are important. Topology data is important. All this is becoming more important to one degree or another. And yes, actionable insights, action. Focus on the tool's ability to provide actionable insights. We asked these people to rank on a scale, rank these 7 insights in terms of their performance, importance. So lower the number, the more important. Security-related insights, very important. Only 10% of the people in this survey were cybersecurity types, but they ranked this number 1. Root cause insights for network problems. So why is my network problem having a problem? But also higher level, application performance. Those are the top 3. Capacity, business impacts, user experience are secondary, and then we threw in there sustainability, like climate sustainability. You've seen some vendors starting to offer that kind of insight in their observability solutions, but not much of a priority overall. However, on the right, you see successful users. The people who said they're most successful with their tools today had a stronger affinity for ranking security insights and climate sustainability insights higher. So possible best practice to be able to track things like energy consumption because it's making more aligned with the business? Maybe. Capacity was definitely not a high priority. However, people in network engineering and DevOps saw a lot more value there than like people in the NOC, people in the CIO suite, people in cybersecurity. So capacity is something to think about, especially if you're like really focused on engineering and architecture, or if you're trying to partner with DevOps, they're going to care about capacity, or maybe you're going to care about capacity because they're doing a lot of stuff with increasing, they're their application environments scale, and you're thinking to yourself, well, um, the direct link between my data center and AWS is not going to be able to sustain this growth. So I need to be hyper aware of how that's going. I also need to be keeping track of um, the capacity of my access network to handle all this traffic that's going more north-south into the cloud rather than maybe east-west into the data center that I have co-located with my users. Things like that. Someone says, can you give a real world example of actionable insights? Um, I'll get to that in a second. Empower more people with network observability. So I'm always talking to people who, you know, have a lot of networking knowledge, they're CCIEs or whatever. They can get a lot of value out of just about any tool. But you put that same tool in the hands of like a tier one technician in your NOC, and they are dangerous or lost or both. They try to dig into something, they're going to get lost. They're most, maybe you've documented a process that says if it isn't this or this, escalate it to tier two or tier three. Don't even bother to try to figure out what's going on. And that's not great when your tier three engineers are at a premium, and you're having a hard time hiring people, which most organizations are right now, hiring people with high-end networking skills. So we asked, does your organization's network operations strategy include a focus on enabling lower skilled personnel to solve a larger share of problems with the tools? Because we think that if you are getting actionable insights out of tools rather than just, having the data presented to you in clever ways, like actually like correlating things, maybe using like natural language just to tell you what might be happening, um, then maybe those tier one technicians can do more of the work that would otherwise be done by your tier three engineers. So yes, the fact that 77.6% say this is a high priority is pretty remarkable. You know, they could have said, a lot of these could have said, well, yeah, it's nice, but it's not a high priority, it's a low priority. But no, more than 3/4 of these guys and gals said this is this is essential. This is essential to the future. I need my tools to deliver more value to people who don't know a lot. 70% of them also said that their tools need to provide insight outside the NOC. And the biggest concern here was empowering IT service management people, cybersecurity, IT architecture, and network engineering. Network engineering, no surprise that they're at the top of the list there. But also data center operations, even like IT governance type people like financial management, vendor management, and DevOps. DevOps. Hey, DevOps, I've discovered that you're caching our you're caching our directory and every time every morning with this microservices tool application environment that you've put together. Like the application is caching our directory and causing everything to grind to a halt. Someone told me that someone told me that happened to them. I was talking to someone like a year ago who's like, we had this DevOps group. They had built this application that would cache our directory every morning for no good reason. And the only way I was able to discover it is because I was seeing all this traffic, and I was like trying to trace where the traffic was coming from and where it was going and why everyone was freaking out. And I was able to finally do it because I used like packet level visibility to see what was going on. Anyway, like if you could present to DevOps, here's what happens when you make this design decision with your application. Um, this is not good or this is better, So DevOps, give them insights. Automate troubleshooting whenever possible. interest in automated network troubleshooting is high. We asked people if this is something that would be appeal to them because no one really does this extensively today. There's some vendors that are doing it here and there and doing it more and more, but the majority of tools out there in the market do not do this. But 41% said, yes, we are very interested in this. Give this to us today. And another almost 45% said that it could be something of interest, somewhat interested. So that's something to look for. Network Tools Engineer at an $8 billion technology company described this well. When something happens, we want a seamless fix with automation. It should trigger an alert that triggers an automation script that checks issues, fixes the problem, and closes the ticket, all without paging a person. That would be nice. I know some vendors can do this a lot more easily than others. It would be nice if vendors could make it easier for you to capture the knowledge of your network engineers in this way. Like wizards, wizard workflows, low code environments that can show like if this is happening, do this, and it can just become like a run book or something. But also on top of that, he talks about productized automated troubleshooting with AI and machine learning. It would be great. And that's what a lot of people are investing in right now in the vendor community is like creating and training these algorithms that can automate a lot of the troubleshooting process, problem isolation, root cause analysis, guided remediation, even auto remediation, if you're comfortable with that. That's an example of that's an example of actionable insights, but it's also an example of like automated workflows depending on how far you want to go with automated troubleshooting. Like, this is the problem. This is why it's happening. This is where it's happening. This is why it's happening. This is how it could be fixed. We fixed it. Those are all steps to take that goes from actionable insight to closed loop operations using things like, as he describes it, triggers and automated scripts and automated fixes and ticket closures, but also AI ops. Those are two different things, but they both could deliver a lot of value. And a lot of that's done with like custom work on the front end. And if you can provide capabilities on the front end that simplify and shorten the amount of customization that happens on the tool, great. Whether that's, like something that makes it less reliant on like your scripting skills and more reliant on like open, like low code environment, or like sophisticated algorithms that can do a lot of automation of troubleshooting and other things. Like, a lot of people are interested in AI and ML algorithms that can just like make alerting smarter and escalations more strategic, things like that. So, final thoughts. Network monitoring vendors are embracing the term network observability in their marketing. And I think it's because they realize that they need to advance to next generation solutions. Network monitoring is associated with things that people have been doing for 20 years. Network observability is more DevOps oriented. NetOps wants to advance, like DevOps is advancing, be more automated, be more efficient, be less of an impediment to the business and more of a solution to business problems. And network observability has that connotation because observability is sort of like the it term coming out of the DevOps world. IT organizations are definitely looking for better tools for network monitoring and troubleshooting. I think this research establishes that quite well. And we have defined the term network observability so that you can know what vendors are talking about when they use it, but also you can tell them what you think. Tell them what you want and what you need and how that should be defining network observability for them when they're talking about it, what their roadmap should be for you. IT organizations should look for tools that collect diverse network data. They should provide that can provide actionable insights and empower more users. That's those are three things to say to them. And when they say, what are actionable insights? We'll tell them, you've done a really good job for a long time of showing me all the data that I need, right? There's so much data and I can get it out of your tools so well. You have it all. You're great at discovering infrastructure. You're great at collecting data. You're great at putting data on time series charts and overlaying different types of data types on a time series scale. And it's really, you're good at showing me correlations here, here, and here. But really, I'm still doing too much of the heavy lifting on figuring out what the data means. I don't want to be doing so much of the work with this data. Like I want to be able to drill in, check if if the data is telling me what you're saying it means. But I would love it if your tool was smart enough to show me what this means. Is it AI and machine learning maybe? Is it just better presentation of the data so that it's more intuitive when we look at it, like how it's presented um, on a chart, on a dashboard, in a portal, with different um, approaches to like showing how di different data sets are related to each other and things like that. It's a lot of work to get there, but I think vendors have recognized that the days of just like giving you access to all the data you need have come and gone. It's really about being able to figure out what the data means and being able to present it to you in a way where you can get the insights just by looking at it. Um, you'll know it when you see it, like this is it's time to stop. It's time to stop doing all this work in your head it's time to be able to see it on the screen more easily. So look for that when you're out there just talking to tool vendors. Um, you can get this report at enterprisemanagement.com. It's like, I don't know, 60, 70 pages. I just gave you the highlights here. There are a lot of other things in there about what's wrong with tools, about what network observability means, about what to look for when people talk about network observability, like what you should be asking them, what you probably what your peers are looking for, what they're struggling with. Lots of best practices highlighted, based on what the most successful of your peers are doing or looking for, all in there. So download it. Some of these sponsors might be able to point you to a free version of it as opposed to paying for it. But I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Raleigh now for Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Shamus. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. The first one this is a pretty big question, so I'm going to lay it out there and see what you say. What did you discover in your research about how to achieve network observability? For example, what are the fundamental foundations that must be laid?
Fundamental foundations. Okay. Do not have a narrow view of your network. Do not collect a narrow data set. Look at the broader universe. Do not confine yourself to your data center or your WAN or your campus network. Look look end to end at the entire user connection and transaction from the end user that might be in the home office all the way to the application environment that might be in your data center or multiple clouds, or all of that. So broad, diverse data set. A lot of people in this research told us that they are interested in establishing some kind of data lake for networking operations data. And a lot of them are looking many of them said that they wanted like one of their monitoring tool vendors to provide a data lake that could collect data from all other tools that they might have in their tool set. And many others are saying, well, I want a standalone data lake where I can collect data from all my tools and drop it into there. And some of those people told us that those data lakes are actually like standalone domain agnostic AI ops platforms. But yes, that's the foundation. And then from there, it's well, there's a lot of different directions you go, but I think vendors need to invest more in algorithms that are, able to do things like predictive analytics, root cause analysis, uh, problem isolation, and intelligent alerting. So algorithm development is important. Also, any sort of customization and integration and documentation around your tool that you might be doing today to make your tools more useful should be supported more actively by your vendors to make it easier for you to make the tool more tuned to your needs. So you're not spending months adapting an off-the-shelf tool to your environment. Um, that should be something that's supported actively by your vendors.
Thanks, Shamus. I mean, I was thinking that could be our next webinar. So I think you did a good job of summing that up at a high level.
Thanks.
The next question is, how do I talk to DevOps about network observability? They don't think it's a thing.
Yeah. So I think you lead with traffic and how traffic can have a huge impact on user experience, like, or reveal a lot about user experience, because they care about user experience, but they're usually confined to how the application environment is affecting user experience. If you can show how you have tools that can reveal the impact of the network on user experience by um, they'll listen. Now, yeah, when you say observability, they're going to say, well, we got um, these APM tools and these log management tools that are, been doing our meeting our observability needs for years. But ask them, like, do you know how the network is impacting your, the success of your applications? Um, or do you just find yourself saying it's the network's fault without being able to know if it's the network's fault? Well, network observability should, in theory, complement your observability. I think they'll be receptive because our research, separate from this research, has shown that the NetOps teams and DevOps teams out there are aligning more closely than they have in the past. And one of the priorities is around operational monitoring. Like the top priorities are application design and security policy design and implementation. Those are like the two top priorities for those two groups working together. But then the secondary priority is monitoring. And the DevOps people were more likely in our research to tell us that monitoring was a priority, which tells you either they think they got the tools the network team needs to be using, or they think the network team has tools that could be of value to them. Either way, they're ready to have a conversation with you about it. So that's my long-winded answer to that question.
Thanks, Shamus. What do actionable insights look like in a network tool?
Yeah, so someone else asked that too, asking a real world example of an actionable insight. So let's say a good example, a really simple example would be like, okay, a tool that correlates, that can show you very quickly that a configuration change um, happened just before a major shift in traffic. That would be nice. Some people can do that, many others can't. Um, Another one would be something more like, um, somebody, um, like an AI driven or machine learning driven algorithm that can tell you that um, based on all the data we're analyzing, these users in this um, in this office are having trouble getting um, with like DHCP in the, handshake on the Wi-Fi network, and so they're not getting a network connection. Um, and thus, we recommend you do this to solve the issue. That I've seen a lot. I've seen more than a handful of vendors that can use advanced algorithms to provide natural language descriptions of a problem that you may have clicked on as an alert and recommended fixes. That's something that's available today from a number of different vendors and a number of different scenarios, but they tend to be very narrowly focused. I think every vendor is kind of expanding the universe of what they can do there. So that's like something that's a little more sophisticated. That is an example of an actionable insight.
Great. Thanks, Shamus. And to wrap things up, is network observability a product or an idea? Or both?
It's both. It's both. Like, we defined it here as a concept, but I think that there are some vendors out there that will try to make it a product. Now, chances are you have more than one vendor for management, network management. The typical enterprise in our research, the typical network operations team in our research has anywhere from 4 to 15 tools that they call network monitoring and management tools. And I've talked to people that have 50, 75 tools. So if if a vendor comes along and says, we have this tool, it's network observability, and it solves everything, are you going to replace that all those tools in your toolkit with that network observability tool? No, you're not. So, but then another vendor will come along and say, we're doing network observability, and you're going to find yourself saying, well, now I'm looking at two network observability tools and they're complementary. Um, and that's what you've seen in product categories in the past, like network performance management. When we look at the network performance management market, I see at least 3 different product categories in that space, but they're all called network performance management. So it's a complex world. I think you're going to see like a lot of people adopting the term or a variation of it. Like some of these sponsors don't use the term network observability, they use something else. Unified observability, full stack observability. I've seen deep observability. They're all coming from the network though. So network observability is a nice way to group them all together, but they might all be doing different things. So I think of it more as like a representation of the advancement and improvement of the network monitoring world, making all of your network monitoring tools more valuable and useful through advancement by your vendors. A lot of your network monitoring, network performance management vendors are going to start using the term network observability or some variation thereof. And you need to be prepared to understand what they mean by it and whether it's actually delivering more value to you. And also talk to them about how they should adapt their roadmap for what it means to your actual needs. Make sure they're moving in the direction you want them to. So yeah, concept, it's a product and an idea. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you for all those great insights, Shamus. And I wanted to thank our audience for taking time out of their schedules to join us. Please be on the lookout for the follow-up email from EMA with the on-demand playback and more information about this new research. Thank you again for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.